Still have the question up.
Hi everyone, welcome to this LinkedIn Live session on self-sabotage. I have to say, when I saw this subject, I thought that's a subject we could talk for a long time about. It's it just spikes so much interest straight away thinking about self-sabotage. So I'm delighted to be joined by Ildiko and Alyson today, and we're going to dive straight in, I think. So Alyson, I'm going to come straight to you. I'm going to pick on you straight away and ask you, so what is self-sabotage then?
Well, thanks very much for asking us to join today, Dean. It's particularly a topic that I'm very interested in as well, as a coach and a facilitator and a practitioner of resilience and mental health, working in the mental health space, particularly to do with career transition. This topic comes up an awful lot in terms of what is it. For me, self-sabotage is something. It's either an intentional or an inaction that undermines the progress or the goals that stops us achieving our goals. Or another way of looking at it is it's the narrative in our heads, that goes in our brains that goes slightly out of kilter, and it leads us to believe that we're no good at something. Again, there's lots of references to things like the inner critic. In particular, I'm very fond of the book that Ethan Kross wrote about harnessing the power of the critic, and how do you harness the voice in your head. We all have them. If anybody tells you they haven't got one, they're not listening hard enough. But we all self-sabotage in some way or form, particularly when we're going through periods of anxiety and stress, particularly in the context of job search.
Okay, fantastic. You just said the inner critic. I think I've probably got more than one of those in my ears. So, Ildiko, how would you describe it, self-sabotage?
Hi. Oh, thanks for having me. First of all, it's great to join the 1080 team today. So in my work, I work with leaders who are either want to step up into senior leadership or they have recently stepped up. And so we talked about career progression a lot. And some of the things that happen is that, these people are very talented people. They already have progressed into leadership roles, but for some reason, they still hinder their own progress very often. And we call that self-sabotage, when we behave in ways, despite our best knowledge and best, skills, that actually stop us from moving forward or just slow us down. So these are, as Alyson shares, some of the thoughts that then lead to behaviors that mean that we don't apply for things, we might take longer than it needs to be, that we might get more nervous at interviews than we should be because we already have all it takes to be successful at that role. So basically it's the behaviors and thoughts that hold us back from putting our best foot forward and our ability to effectively market ourselves in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Can I stay with you on this? Because I'm really, really intrigued on our next question. Because if we've got an idea of what it actually is, I'm really curious to learn more about, well, why do we do it then? Why do we self-sabotage? What do you think?
In a way, it's a self-preservation process. So if I may come in with a bit of a neuroscience and behavioral science, our brain is designed to, especially the amygdala part of it, is designed to keep us safe. So back, ancient times when we were still chased by the tigers, we had to watch out for everything that could be a risk to our health, our well-being. And that part of the brain hasn't developed enough. So right now, our brain, that part of the brain is still watching out for those things that might go wrong. So we have the fears, we have these limiting beliefs, we have these perceptions that are not actually based on the truth, the accurate what is going on, but as a result of our imagination, we imagine that things might be going wrong. So we get blocked by these fears and different blocks. But as Alyson mentioned, a lot of it starts with those thoughts we now have that then leads to all those behaviors.
Brilliant. Okay, Alyson, could you add to that as well? Why do you think? Tell me why I self-sabotage. I know I do it. Why do I do it?
Well, I think as has been already mentioned, it's a coping mechanism for stressful situations, and whatever we choose to do, even if we know it's not the right thing to do necessarily, it's about making a choice, and we either choose to not do something or to do something that we know is not going to be particularly helpful. And as we said, quite often this is a response to something that's happened in our childhood, or a childhood issue, or a trauma. Quite often when I have a client who comes to me and says, I know I have issues around my self-esteem, some of it comes from situations where somebody in their past has told them they're not going to be good enough. I have an example of a particular client where a teacher, and again, God help us, this was quite a long time ago, and I'm sure it doesn't happen as much now, said, "You will never make anything of your life." And then she held on to that phrase, even though she knew it wasn't true. And that's what creates the trauma, and that's what creates low self-esteem. And unfortunately, it takes a bit of work after years of learnt behaviour to have to stop doing something and try doing something different. It's not easy.
And I would imagine there'd be quite a lot of people who are watching us today, dialing in, listening to us, who will associate with that comment around a teacher, because that's probably one of the largest areas of influence where in our early years. I know I can associate with it, but it's not about me, and I'm not going to bore people with my tales of awful French lessons as a child. What I'd like to, I'm going to move on to the next question. I'm going to quickly skip over that and move on to the next question. Again, Alyson, maybe if I stay with you on this one for a second. What triggers it then? What causes it? I think we've already started to allude, but tell me more about that.
I think it goes back to that whole thing about trying to protect ourselves and from what we think is a threat. And in the context of looking for a new job and career transition, it is that whole thing around safety and fear of failure and uncertainty. We know that change is hard. This is why we do what we do in terms of supporting people through change. But it does always create that fear. And that response, as Ildiko has already mentioned, the kind of fight, flight, or freeze response, brings up lots of different triggers to us to either avoid something or to put it off or to delay it. One of the most common examples is avoidance. I worked with a client, and I tell everybody this story because I think it's really helpful, who came to see me several times, and she was trying to write her CV. And she came back to me and said, "I just can't do it." 3 times on the trot, she returned to see me and said, "I can't write my CV." And actually, she said to me, "I'd rather hoover my stairs than write my CV," which I think was hilarious. And I tell everybody that story because I said to her, "Well, at least you'll have clean stairs." But the point of it was that actually what was holding her back was the fact that she suddenly found herself in this situation. It wasn't her choice to be in this situation. She was in a job she loved. She was very good at it. And she didn't want to be going out to market. She simply found the whole thing about writing her CV and having to go and sell herself. She just hadn't come to terms with that letting go of the job and acknowledging what she'd lost, but also acknowledging what she had. And so, that is a bit typical example of avoidance. But when she did write her CV eventually, she found it very therapeutic in terms of reminding herself how good she was. But lots of people have a big block over that, and I think that's one of the biggest areas of avoidance.
So it's almost like self-sabotage in the sense that if I don't do something about it, I might be setting myself up for failure, but I'm managing the disappointment because I'm telling myself I'm not going to get that job. Therefore, I'm not disappointed when I don't. Oh, wow. My wife would say that I avoid hoovering the stairs, so I can counteract your coachee. Ildiko, triggers. What's your thoughts on triggers and hoovering the stairs?
I don't like hoovering the stairs. I'd rather write a CV. Alyson mentioned fear of failure that leads to procrastination and avoidance. Another big one is the fear of rejection. So because we fear that we might get a no and we might get rejected, again, it also leads to procrastination, but it also leads to playing safe, staying in our comfort zone. So we apply for jobs that are safe, even if we are really bored of the stuff that we've been doing and we would like to grow, because we fear rejection, we keep applying for the same type of roles. So there's no progress, there's no movement, there's no salary, or sometimes even, people apply and take jobs at lower salaries because they think, oh, if I do that, I won't be rejected so much. And at interviews, they undersell themselves, they undersell their strength. Also, and another one, if I may add another one, is the lack of clarity of what they actually want. So that means that they don't have a strategy, they don't have a vision, they don't know exactly what roles to look for based on, what is it that they want ideally in the future. So they might be applying for the wrong jobs, which also means they will feel really uncomfortable or uninterested at the interviews, even if they get it, which means that the recruiters will pick this up and then they won't be getting the jobs if they keep applying for the wrong jobs. Or the other thing that can happen, if there's no plan, there's no strategy, they feel a bit lost. They keep applying for everything and anything. As a result, they get overwhelmed, they get more and more rejection. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and leads to stress and reduction in confidence further, which again just hinders the progress even more.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes you get people saying to you, I've heard about this job and I'm been told I'm overqualified. And that kind of links to what you're saying there. Well, have they applied for a position at the right level that's a stretch, or have they gone downwards in their trajectory to try and manage that sort of self-sabotage? We've had a question come in that says, do we sometimes self-sabotage to be less fearful of failure? And I think we're answering
that's about the staying safe. Exactly what we just talked about. Yeah, very much.
And it's that comfort zone that you've been that you were talking about. Okay, interesting. Either of you, any other triggers? We've got avoidance, we've got rejection, we've got the comfort zone, got underselling ourselves, we've got that clarity over what we do want to be doing. Any other triggers you can think of?
I've got one more around accountability. So we and the lack of support, lack of networking, because very often we think that, oh, I need to do this and I feel like I'm failing, I'm not getting the job, so I don't like to talk about it. So we don't contact our network, we don't look for support, which is really helpful. We don't need to be alone in this process. So it's very important to consider, so what sort of support do I need during this process? Is it a CV review? Is it an interview practice? Is it just some feedback? Is it a bit of encouragement? Is it the accountability to make sure that I am applying, or at least I'm spending an hour every day looking for a job, or whatever it is that we need to achieve? So accountability and having the support network is also very important, and the lack of it can also trigger self-sabotage again.
Okay.
It's self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, absolutely. Alyson, any others from you?
Yeah, I think there was a couple for me when I talk about things like managing your own levels of resilience, is managing your own emotional response, and realizing that as this is a stressful time, that our emotions are riding high and we're buffering up against that layer of stress, and sometimes that comes out in anger and we end up picking fights with people or shouting at our kids or those things. And that's all very normal because this is a stressful situation. The other thing I think that I notice in clients in job searches is setting unrealistic expectations in terms of what I'm going to achieve this week. I often say to people, don't say I'm going to write my CV on Friday, because chances are that's a big ask. Break it down into manageable activities. Write your key skills and your profile. Spend 2 hours on it. Structure your week. You can't say I'm going to apply for 6 jobs this week, because there might not be 6 jobs out there. It's thinking about doing short bursts of things that are harder, and then rewarding yourself by doing something that you enjoy. So I think we're moving on to sort of help from in terms of relieving some of the symptoms, but those are some of the things I think we set ourselves up to fail by saying I'm going to do this week, and that's unrealistic.
So unrealistic expectations, managing the emotional side of things. And I think if you pick up on that example that you had where the person probably wasn't ready to apply for a new role, they liked the role they were doing, is in certain circumstances that acceptance, I've reached the acceptance stage where I need to do something, and if I'm not quite there, I'm probably going to self-sabotage beforehand, aren't I? So
yeah.
Okay. So
May I?
Go on, carry on. Go on. You go.
No, something was coming up, and I thought it might be useful to share. Is another trigger that is when we take the whole process too personally. For example, the rejection. If we say no, rejection and no is part of the job search process. There's only one role. There's 200 applications. I'm keeping my eye on the market right now, and I can see after 5 days, there's like 200 applications or even more for each job. So that no is part of the process. It's not a personal thing. You have to look at it as a bit of a matching game, right? The business is looking for the right skills, the right experience, the right personality to fit into organization. We are looking for the right role that gives us a bit of a stretch, an extra step. So there might be 10, 15 different people with a similar background or in various ways being able to fill the role perfectly, but the organization needs to decide to pick one. So there will be no's. It's better to look at the whole process as okay, I'm doing my best to meet the requirements of the job ad. So you get to the interview, then our role as an applicant is to show our best side, to show the strengths, to show how we can add value. So the focus, the mindset is very important there, that I'm doing my best. But at the same time, I'm also finding out whether the organization, the culture, the role, the team is what I'm looking for. Based on that, the vision and the strategy and the plan that I talked about earlier, to make sure that there's an alignment. So it's not just about getting a job for the sake of getting a job, but also making sure it's aligned with you, so you are happy and you're progressing and growing long term as well.
Excellent, brilliant. And I think we've probably come up with a couple of examples of self-sabotage in the job search as we've been talking, but can you think of some other examples that you could share with us?
I've got one in terms of the avoidance approach. We talk a lot about that in the psychology in that change curve that you've referred to, Dean. So the bottom of the curve where you hit the bit at I call it the pit of misery when we're sitting there. In the approach avoidance piece, and sometimes where someone makes a decision to say they're going to set up their own business, and the approach avoidance is where you are both equally as positive and negative in sort of equal amounts, because you're excited but then you're scared. So you do all of the nice bits around setting up your own business, designing your business cards, but when it actually gets closer, you start to get very negative feelings about, can I actually do this? And I think that's a really strong example of when self-sabotage kicks in, because you can do all the you can have a lovely spreadsheet with everything you need to do on it, but actually when you have to actually start doing it, then the negative, from which is the kind of approach avoidance piece.
Well, you're in the procrastination bit that we were talking about earlier there, aren't you? Because it's really easy to get absorbed and spend lots of time, designing a logo, because it means you don't have to do the hard work and actually contact people and actually try and bring some business in. What other examples would there be if somebody was, looking for a job, searching for a job? What other examples could either of you give me where self-sabotage has played its hand?
Another big one is that I come across that actually most clients I work with are talking about imposter syndrome. So the imposter syndrome is when someone's already achieved something, but they feel like they don't deserve that success, and they will be found out as an imposter. And interestingly, most often these are people who already have achieved quite a lot, but for some reason, in the back of their mind, we talked about the self-doubt and the self-critique. They still feel like they are someone else who they used to be like 10 years ago, and they forget about that 10 years when they have grown and achieved and they proved and they provided value. So some, again, going back to that self-protection piece, where it shows is either when someone's experiencing imposter syndrome, either they go into overdrive, as I simplify it sometimes, when they feel like they need to do too much, and then as a result, they might be burning out. And another reason is the procrastination piece again, when they don't just procrastinate about taking action. So there's a lack of action there, but also they're hiding. So they don't show up. They don't share, at an interview. They fail to share the best examples of how they've achieved things because they don't want to brag or they don't want to be found out. So they rather not talk about those things. They don't show up in their full greatness.
Okay, brilliant. I suppose another example might be where somebody thinks they're in a company at the moment, they've applied for a more senior position within that, and they almost feel like it's their right to get that job, and self-sabotage because they don't try as hard at the interview stage as somebody who really, really wants it. I'm a little bit conscious of our time, so what I'd like to do is just bring this next one up, is how do we overcome it? Because we've got a better understanding of what it is, why we do it, what some of the triggers are, and we've had some really good examples of self-sabotage and evidence of how it happens, where it happens in the job search. So how could we overcome it? Alyson, can I start with you on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ildiko referred to it earlier about in the neuroscience of the brain, and we've got a lot more information on that over the last sort of 20 to 30 years. It is possible to reprogram our neural pathways to think in a different way and not to focus on the negative. It is also about looking for patterns. What is the critic saying to you? Often it's jumping up and down our head at 2 o'clock in the morning saying you're never going to get another job or you're not good enough. And basically what I would say to that is we need to challenge that. We need to challenge that critic. Steve Peters talks about it in the chimp paradox a lot, and the example he gives around asking the British cycling team to cycle a bit faster, and they're saying, sorry mate, we can't do that. And he said it's not a physical thing, it's a mental thing. You're telling yourself you can't do it, therefore it's not happening. And he talks about challenging the chimp or giving it a banana or putting it back in its cage. But essentially, it's basically us saying to ourselves, is what I'm telling myself true? Is it really true? And what is there to suggest the opposite? So always when I say to people, when they say to me, I'm never going to get another job, I say, well, actually, you've always had a job. You will get another job. You just don't know when. What is there to suggest that the opposite will always apply? And it's that challenge and that behaviour to reframe things in a different way.
Brilliant. Okay, Ildiko, what about yourself? A way of overcoming how can me and my chimp, who's called Herbert, that's another story. How can we overcome self-sabotage? Your thoughts on that one, please.
Great. We are monkeys. I actually one of the type of work that has been really successful for my clients so far is positive psychology based work. So, for example, strength work, improving the self-awareness about who we truly are to fight back those, mindset monkeys, and reducing the self-doubt and the self-critique. And it's based on, we assess, we identify the strengths, the things that we are good at, the things that we also enjoy. Because if we work in ways that aligns and builds on our strength and our passions, it becomes a lot easier, a lot more enjoyable, and the success. And for example, at interview, when you talk about your true strength and your passions, you are energized. You're a lot more relaxed. You are talking about the things you enjoy, so you can communicate them a lot better. You come across as passionate, and who wouldn't want that? So doing some strength work and also values work, because I talked about the strategy, the plan, and alignment, and the vision, and things like that. It's very, very important to identify the values that you hold dear, and the values that you want to align with in your job search, as well as the new role and the culture of the organization, because that will help you find the right roles to apply for, the right companies to go to, and you will truly be passionate and interested. Again, a very, very important thing when you get to interviews, to demonstrate that. And it's a lot easier when it actually comes from the inside, that truly, believe in it.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a couple of minutes left, a few minutes left. So maybe we could just turn our attention to some top tips, because I'm sure from hearing both of you speak, I'm sure both of you have got probably half an hour's worth of top tips just on their own, and we have about 3 minutes instead. So Alyson, if I go to you first, what's your top tip to overcome self-sabotage?
I would like to start by saying, we know it's something that we do, but you're not broken and you don't need fixing. Is probably my first top tip.
Okay.
It is normal to have fear, particularly in situations around change. I've heard statistics as high as 60% of the population don't like change for all of the reasons we've said. The unknown, we don't know what we want to do, we don't know how we're going to show up, all of those things, which creates that self-sabotaging behavior. I suppose the tip, therefore, would be recognizing when things are coming up for us, what's triggering that emotion. I'm also quite passionate about recognizing where you feel it in the body. So sometimes it's, we know these things come from within. We try and suppress them, but that they do have a habit of coming up. And think about techniques to deal with that. So, simple stuff like box breathing. I know it. People say, "Oh, yes, I know I need to breathe," but just sitting before you go into an interview and doing a round of box breathing, which is deep, in breaths and longer exhales, it not only does it reduce your blood pressure and lower your heart rate, but it will help you to start to focus on the task in front of you, which is going into your interview. And I suppose my second one would be around self-limiting beliefs. Is stop, believing the things that no longer serve you. Go back to that thing I said. Is it true? Is it really true? And what is the opposite to suggest, or what is it to suggest the opposite? So that would be my tips.
Okay, brilliant. Ildiko, top tip or top tips from you, please.
Something that's a bit different, but still also linked, is the importance of developing a growth mindset and continually working on that. Because not getting the job, it doesn't mean you have failed. It means that for some reason there was no alignment. It's a lot more powerful and effective if we look at every single situation like a learning opportunity. So what worked there? Very important to look at what actually worked there. and build on that and utilize it again and again. What are the things that didn't work? How can I do it differently next time? So rather than looking at it and allowing it to block us, I said, well, that didn't work. I'm not going to find anything. I'm going to get depressed now and really sad and just cry. Look at, okay, do a bit of analysis. So what worked really well? What can I do more of? Or enhance it even more? And what are the things that didn't quite work that I need to polish a little bit more? So all of this, looking at the job search as a journey. I know it can be very frustrating because it takes time and you put a huge amount of effort into your job search, and then you get a no. It's really disheartening, but don't let it stop you from continue looking for that ideal, role going forward. Take it as one step at a time, as Alyson mentioned earlier. Break it down to small steps, so you don't get overwhelmed, you don't get too stressed out about it. And when you are stressed about it, pull on that network that I've mentioned before. Tell them that you need a bit of help right now, that you need to talk to someone, you need to figure something out, that, oh, this didn't quite work in their job search or in their job interview. I'd like to improve it. Can I practice with you? That sort of stuff. So growth mindset, developing growth mindset, and that resilience of not giving up, but taking the next step and just focusing on what we can control.
Brilliant.
So how you're preparing for the search, how you're preparing for the interview, how you're utilizing your network that I mentioned a few times now, maintaining your persistence and keep taking the action, and how you present yourself at the interview. Other than that, the things you can't control will just stress you out. So focus back, come back, and focus on the things that you can control.
Brilliant. Okay, we're up on our time today, so I just want to thank you both for some really good insights there. And really, one of the things I'm taking away from the session is about that, being kind to yourself and being, focusing on the things I can control rather than the areas I can't influence. My areas of concern. No, I need to narrow the field down and focus on what I can influence and control. And we had a comment in the comments saying that mindfulness can be useful with these things, and that links in perfectly well with about the breathing and everything else. So I just want to say thank you both for joining me today. Fascinating subject. It's one that I think we could easily carried on for a long time, but hope to see you again, both of you, on another session. I'm just going to bring up onto the screen to let everybody know what our next LinkedIn Live session is going to be about, and that's going to be about building relationships with recruiters. And that links in really nicely to what you were saying about that network, expanding your network and really helping with that. So thank you both. I'm going to end the stream now for everybody. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you on the next LinkedIn Live at a later date. Couple of comments coming in here. Thank you for a great session. We've got here, thank you for some useful tips. So brilliant. Thanks. Thank you both. Thank you everybody else for joining us, and bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.